open and physically accessible to the public. The City Council will be conducting this hearing virtually. This enables the Council to carry out its responsibilities while adhering to public health recommendations and ensuring public access to deliberations through adequate alternative means. This public hearing is being recorded and live streamed on the city website. It will also be rebroadcast at a later date on Xfinity 8, RCN 82, and FiOS 964. Today's hearing is on dockets number 0195, 0247, 0363 through 0365, 0689, 0859, 0860, and 0910. Okay, hold on one second. I'm dealing with a tantrum outside my door. Okay, I'm going to read the dockets into the record, and then we will dive right in. I want to acknowledge that my colleagues, Councillor Liz Braden, Councillor Anissa Asabi-George, and so adding them to the room, Councillor Julia Mejia, and Councillor Kenzie Bach are present as well. Okay, here we go. Please bear with me because there are several dockets here to read in a lot of language.
Hi, Councillor, I'm here too. Just wanted to let you know.
Good morning. Yes, we recognize you, Councillor Mejia. Thank you. Grants to fund various transportation projects in the City of Boston. Docket number 0195, message and order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expend the amount of $200,000 in the form of a 2019 transportation planning grant awarded by the Massachusetts Gaming Commission to be administered by the Boston. Docket number 0247, message and order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expend the amount of $406,299 in the form of a grant awarded by the Massachusetts Department of Transportation pursuant to the Federal Safe, Accountable, Flexible, Efficient Transportation Equity Act, a legacy for users. The purpose of this grant is to fund the preliminary and final design of Boylston Street between Ipswich Street and Brookline Ave in Boston. Docket number 0363, message and order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expend a grant from the Massachusetts Department of Transportation in an amount not to exceed $4 million for the design and engineering services related to the North Washington Street Bridge project. Docket number 0364, message and order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expend a grant from NSTAR Electric Company doing business as Eversource Energy in an amount not to exceed $3,860,000 for costs related to construction of the North Washington Street Bridge. Docket number 0365, message and order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expend a grant from the Boston Gas Company doing business as National Grid in an amount not to exceed $2,890,000 for costs related to construction of the North Washington Street Bridge. Docket number 0689, message and order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expend a grant from the Boston Planning and Development Agency in the amount not to exceed $200,000 to pay for the cost related to the 100% design PSD of the intersection improvements project at Heath Street and South Huntington Ave in Jamaica Plain. Docket number 0859, message and order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expend the amount of $295,000 in the form of a 2020 transportation construction grant awarded by the Massachusetts Gaming Commission to be administered by the Boston Transportation Department. The purpose of this grant is to fund the Cambridge Street and Maffel Way portions of the Lost Village project in the Charlestown neighborhood. Docket number 0860, message and order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expend the amount of $200,000 in the form of a 2020 transportation planning grant awarded by the Massachusetts Gaming Commission to be administered by the Boston Transportation Department. The purpose of the grant is to fund a portion of the design cost under the Tetra Tech contract for the Sullivan Square Rutherford Ave project. And last but not least, docket number 0910, message and order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expend a grant from the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority, Mbta, in the amount not to exceed $30 million for costs related to the construction and implementation of dedicated bus lanes and similar bus priority measures in various locations within the City of Boston. These matters are sponsored by the Mayor and referred to the Committee on Planning, Development, and Transportation on various dates. And I think we can dive right in. Okay, great. So we have acknowledged all the counselors who are here. Before I go to our administration panel, would any of my colleagues like to make an opening statement, especially if you have to run later or Okay, I'm not seeing takers, so we will go right to Chief Osgood.
Councilor Wu, thank you so much. Members of the City Council, thanks so much for hosting this hearing. I'm Chris Osgood. I have the honor of serving as Mayor Walsh's Chief of Streets, and I'm joined today by Parajaya Singh, our City Engineer, by Commissioner Rooney, Boston Transportation Department, Vineet Gupta, Charlotte Fleetwood, Bill Conroy, and Matt Moran, all of BTD. And we're going to briefly introduce the 9 accept and expend orders that Councilor Wu just went through, and the 6 projects they help advance, and then just connect them to the team members who are leading each of those projects. And then I'll turn it over to Matt for a little bit extra context about the final accept and expend order, and then happy to sort of take all your questions from there. So the first project is the North Washington Street Bridge project. This is actually probably the largest and most significant public works project that is certainly happening in the city right now, and that has happened in the city for quite some time. There are 3 accept and expend orders associated with this project. As folks, I think, are very well aware, this is a bridge, which is a project that is currently under construction. The result of this project is going to be an entirely new bridge that in design is going to complement the beauty of the Zachem Bridge, and in function really support a lot of the city's long-term transportation goals that are laid out in Go Boston 2030, including an inbound dedicated bus lane, new cycle tracks on both sides, and a far better pedestrian experience for everybody who's crossing the bridge, including everybody who's on the Freedom Trail that is crossing that bridge. This is a project which has been led and is being led by Para and by his team, and there are 3 accept and expend orders for this project: 0363, 0364, and 0365, which are helping to cover the cost of design and construction. Of particular note, 2 of those accept and expend orders, as you read, are funded through utility companies, and this is in recognition of the infrastructure that bridge carries, either for National Grid or for Eversource, and the resulting cost impacts that holding that infrastructure on this bridge has. The second project is the Rutherford Ave and Sullivan Square project. There are 2 accept and expend orders for this project. This project is approaching 25% design. The result of this project is going to be a completely reimagined Rutherford Ave and Sullivan Square corridor, where we will be reducing the number of general travel lanes, increasing the amount of pedestrian and bike accommodations, something in design somewhat akin to the Southwest Corridor design. We will be setting aside space for potential future dedicated bus lanes in this corridor, redesigning the square area, rotary, and putting in more pedestrian-friendly street grid, allowing for real growth in the Orange Line corridor along this path. Process project is being led by process on this program, led by Bill Conroy. The 2 accept and expend orders, which are 0195, 860, are both grants from the Gaming Commission and are helping the design of this really critical street redesign project. Third project completes sort of a roadway projects, starting with the North Bridge, moving on to Rutherford Ave, and at the northern extent. This has an expand order associated with the Massachusetts Gaming Commission. This project is also being led by, and essentially it's looking at designing some of the key intersections that are to the Lost Village Street along Moffat Way, make them better for the residents of the village, particularly seeing increased congestion overall. The project is a project of Boylston Street. This is really looking at improving pedestrian accommodations and cycling accommodation on a transforming stretch of the West Fens, from Ipswich Street all the way to Pilgrim Road on the far side of the Park Drive section. This is a project by Charlotte Fleetwood, and the acceptance here is from Mass number 247. The 5th project, Heath Street and Huntington Ave, Heath Street and South intersection. This is actually looking at a place that we were recently, which is the terminus of the E line, Heath Street, and looking how we can improve the design intersection and accessibility to the E line, and also helps advance something which I think is a collective goal of all of ours, which is we are not only ensuring great transit access to the hospital and to Heath Street, Also thinking about how that transit and E-line service could extend up to High. That project is being led by Bill Conroy and has one accept and expend, which is 689, and that is mitigation VPDA. And then the project that has an accept and expend associated with related to bus lanes and bus priority, and it is actually an accept and expend for a series of improvements that'll riders in the city of Boston. Actually turn it over to Matt Moran, leads the city's transit team, and talk about and the purpose of this acceptance.
Thank you very much, Chief, and good morning, Madam Chair, members of the. As the Chief said, and I serve as the Director of the Boston Transportation Department. I'm in the city's bus programs, specifically to docket number 090. So, as you might remember, the transit team was formed in February 2018 with the goal of collaborating Mbta and improving transit. Our guide is 2030, and the priorities and mission of that transit plan. Over the years, we've worked collaboratively with transit priority measures throughout the city. These have included securing additional and Charlie card readers for the Ferry, the commuter rail efforts, upgrades to the green and bus network plan. However, our work has been the installation of bus lanes on city streets. Recently, we've installed bus lanes in Brighton Ave in Alston, North Washington Street in the North End, South Station, and Street for the Silver Line. Have saved riders time and improved mobility. In addition, with community to plan for other multimodal corridors, such as bike loading zones and improved pedestrians. Currently, we're hard at work on additional bus lane projects. In the coming months, we plan to complete Columbus Ave and Jamaica Plain and outbound Street in Rosendale and North Washington Street in the North End. Additionally, we're working on community planning efforts for bus priority corridors in Dorchester, Mbta, East Boston, Alston, Brighton, downtown, the South Boston, Rosendale, and Hyde Park. On the process side, BTA community engagement efforts, bus lane projects. The BTA funds design collaboratively with BTD public works departments, and then the city or MBTA install lines. If the city performs the installation for bus priorities, the MBTA then reimburses the bulk of those project costs. We're before you today for the council for BTD's ability to spend upon receipt funds from the purpose of supporting the city's priority programs. Approval ensures planning work that is now completed in a swift and timely once community consensus is reached. This approval allows to move quickly in funding bus priority construction. Finally, it allows for us to continue our success with the MBTA plan implementation. Thank you very much for your time and open to answering any you might have.
Thanks so much, Matt. Councilor, turn it over for questions.
Thank you very much, everyone. I think we, councilors and others who might have specific projects, rather than go project, let's just go councilor. I think that'll be more. So, the order is then Asabi George, then Mickey.
So $30 million seems like a lot of money. You do a lot of planning. Just for a ballpark figure, does a dedicated bus lane stretch like from Union Packers Corner? How much does it cost?
I know a stretch that's near to your heart, really near and dear to my heart as well. Very good question. And to your point, it really varies on the corridor length. It really varies on what sort of implementation is happening on the corridor. So corridor can be sort of relatively simple to implement, which Brighton Ave to some extent was, because we were switching out signage, we were doing new pavement markings. A corridor could be also really a bit more complicated to implement. So Columbus Ave, where we're moving curb and adding new bus islands. For a project like Brighton Ave, though, we're looking at roughly in the order of $600,000 for just the striping and curbside regulations. So, it's a 2/3 of a mile stretch. So roughly $600,000 for that stretch. We are hoping to come back in the spring to work on some curb bump outs. We're still working on a cost for that, and we're still working with the T to finalize that design. And obviously, we're still working on the community process for that. But that will cost some additional amount of money as well.
That's good. And looking forward, I know that the mobility study is proposing an extension of the bike dedicated bus lanes in, sort of from Brighton Centre down to Union Square. Is that, I know there's a lot of other really important projects that maybe get priority, but is there a timeline for thinking about extending the dedicated bus lane in Alston, Brighton?
Sure. Chief, would you like to?
Or looks like Vinny, you can walk through sort of like, I think, a two-stage plan, a 2021 study, a 2022 implementation, but Vinny, feel free to correct me on that.
No, that's correct. I think the design process would be done in 21 with construction starting earliest in 22.
Very good. Those are all my questions for now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Braden. Councillor Sabi George.
Thank you again, and I do appreciate sort of the insight that the district councilors have on these projects in their own districts. But just thinking sort of ahead, and this is maybe not the most appropriate place to ask this question, but specific to the bus lanes, what's next in the pipeline? What are we looking for to add down the road? Because I don't see how any of us, or we won't be opposing these. So I'm curious what's next so we can look forward to it.
Matt, do you want to go through the list or Vinny, of what's in design or what's in community conversation at this point?
Go ahead, Matt.
Sure. So I can take the first stab at, and then Chief Vinny, feel free to add in anything that I might have missed. But in general, what we're looking at over the next few months is to complete work that we've started in Rosendale, to work a bit more in the North End, to do the outbound North Washington Street bus lane, and then to work with the T on completing the Columbus Ave corridor. And then, as I alluded to, we are in planning for several other corridors, which really involve in-depth community process that I think we still have to work out. So Blue Hill Ave is first and foremost on our list. We're looking at the corridor from Grove Hall all the way down to Mattapan Square. And we're looking at trying to, fine tune with the community the design. So we want to make sure that we're getting it right from a safety perspective, from a sort of merchant and community perspective, and then also from a mobility perspective. So there's a lot more planning that needs to happen, but that's certainly the first and foremost corridor that's on our minds for this coming year.
Yeah, but I think in addition to Blue Hill Avenue, I would add Warren Street. And then there's that section of Columbus Avenue from Malcolm X to Ruggles. Did I get that right?
Exactly.
I think it's important to note that there's a lot of community process that has to take place to make those a reality. That's one. And two, that most of these would also include making sure that there's a protected bike lane as part of the project, and also making sure that traffic flow continues efficiently. So there's a design challenge ahead and there's a community challenge ahead, but those are the major projects.
So thinking about that, and I've seen some of the changes recently, and I've known that they were coming, and they surprised me still. So I wonder sometimes about, with that community engagement, a lot of work goes into sort of the back end and starting those conversations. But when the changes come, are we doing education in our communities about how that space is used? Because, in some parts of the city, things that are underway, I've seen cars parked in bike lanes or inappropriately parked, because there is a learning curve when learning how to parallel park in a parking spot that's now a separated bike lane. And then, the turning lane, I'm thinking about the other day coming from Albany Street, taking a left at BMC onto Mass Ave. and all of a sudden one of the lanes is gone. And it sort of took me by surprise a little bit. And so thinking about the education and the awareness and, even temporary proper signage to really educate whether it's the vehicle, the pedestrian, or the bicyclist on those changes.
I think it's a fantastic point, and one which you're right that we probably do more outreach on the front side than we do kind of sort of post-implementation. We have deployed recently a set of VMS boards, and Commissioner, correct me if I'm off on this, I think they're currently on American Legion Highway, essentially with exactly this intent in mind. I think there's a lot more that we can do that is really oriented towards the driver. On a lot of the corridors that we're redesigning, there is signage which is kind of more pedestrian scale, but I think there's some additional work that we can do both through traditional media, social media, and then on-street sort of notification about changes and what they are and why they are.
And I'd also just say that there's been some sort of controversy in some of the changes, especially along, I think it's Cummings Highway. And just, as that work goes forward, sort of celebrating and promoting the positive impacts that those changes have had, because I think it's until you're in the midst of that, it is, we're unaccustomed to change. We don't like change as people. But the education and the continued positive messaging around those changes, what the benefits are, slowing down traffic, creating more opportunities for bicyclists, for example, but really, making the area safer and slowing down traffic, because traffic along a lot of these corridors is very fast. So I'd encourage that education and sort of that celebration of the benefits of these changes. That's it for me, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sabi George. Councillor Mejia.
I'm on mute. Good morning, all. So I just have a few questions in regards to the process. I'm just curious in terms of the bidding process in particular. Have you guys earmarked and have developed any plans to ensure that the folks who are going to be doing this work are minority businesses and women? I'm just curious about how intentional you're being in that space and what that process looks like. And to Councilor Sabi George's question in regards to the community education, I think that oftentimes these things pop up in our neighborhood and we don't even know that this was happening. So I'm just curious in terms of the communication, if there was a way to, how there's ONS sends out text messages. Is there other ways to inform the public about what is going to be coming down the pipeline in their neighborhood so that they can participate in that process of planning?
I appreciate both those questions. I'll gladly start, and then others feel free to add in. On the bidding, we'll absolutely obviously be following the equitable procurement process, and if there are potential design firms, construction firms, et cetera, that we should make sure that are on the list that we should be doing outreach to. We obviously welcome that. I would say a small note. We are very much looking for probably there's a small number of respondents in some of the things which we're doing a small number of businesses. We do welcome sort of more businesses who would enter this space and doing things like helping us create dedicated bus lanes. Those sort of things would actually, I think, have great value. There's some opportunities there for more companies to be in that particular space. On notification, education, and outreach, there's a lot of things that we have tried new over the last couple of months, with lots of credit to Para's team, to the Commissioner, Vineet, we've done videos, we've done community meetings in multiple languages. We're doing flyers in multiple languages. By no means, Councilor, and we sort of talked about this before, do we think that we've sort of gotten all of that outreach correct, though? And so if there's specific thoughts of other outreach tools that we should be leveraging, things we should be doing, we very much welcome those suggestions as well. We're trying a lot of new things in that space, and I think we've been very excited to kind of embrace these new tools, but still looking to kind of refine the toolkit in the months and years ahead. I don't know if there's things that other members of the team want to sort of touch on in terms of outreach tools we've been using.
I think in addition to all the techniques you mentioned, Chief Oscar, we're also along major corridors. We literally go door by door and make sure that a flyer is there, and particularly with small businesses, we make sure that we made person-to-person contact, socially distanced, of course, to let people know that there's change coming in their corridor, and to work with them to address any of their kind of hyper-local issues that they might have for that particular block. Mm-hmm. And so it's a block-by-block, establishment by establishment process as well. But again, we need to improve our outreach as much as we can, and we'd love to get more ideas.
So my last question is in regards to the businesses that are surrounding these bus lanes. I'm just curious about what the level of engagement has been with these businesses.
Matt, do you want to talk through either Brighton Ave as an example of some of the other work which you guys have done?
Yeah, and I think Brighton Ave is a good sort of template that we've been using for other projects, that my team's been working on. I know my sort of cohort in active transportation and community planning have been doing as well. So on Brighton Avenue, we were very intentional about going door to door. And this was obviously pre-COVID, and speaking with every single business on the corridor, giving them both a flyer. We also did mailings for all the businesses because we know sometimes the flyer doesn't get to the right person. So we wanted to make sure that we were covering all the bases there. And, in one area in particular, we spoke with an auto repair dealer who had an issue with sort of the placement of the bus stop in front of his business. We walked a few doors down. There's another business who said, "Oh, I'd actually like a bus stop in front of my business." And so we were able to slide the bus stop down half a block, which I think worked well for both businesses. So it's doing that very intentional outreach to understand what the needs were in that individual block and working with those business owners on that. So I know my colleague, William Moose, did that recently in Eggleston Square with the Columbus Ave project, where he spoke to the business associations. And I think he went to 3 different associations, and he speaks fluent Spanish, so he was able to speak to one of those associations as well. And then he also, we went door to door and flyered and spoke with the businesses individually. So I think it's being very intentional in that way.
Great, thank you very much. Are you good, Councilor Mejia?
I think my internet froze a little bit, but I don't know. I think I did have one more question.
Oh, go for it.
I know you guys listed a list of all the community projects, and then I noticed that Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan, and East Boston were at the end of that list. And I'm just curious if they were at the end because they're the last to get any love, or that we're just rattling off names. I'm just curious about those neighborhoods.
Councilor, correct me if I'm wrong, you were sort of speaking about the list that Matt went through at the end of sort of where we're looking to do bus lane projects. Okay, so yes. And Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was just simply in sequence. And in fact, the places that we're focusing really are sort of first major projects in the community engagement, which we're really most focused on right now, are the Blue Hill Ave corridor, the Warren Street corridor, and sort of the Malcolm X Columbus Ave connection between Nubian Square and Ruckle Station. That those are sort of in many ways, the principal areas we're focusing on in 2021. And to your question, and a bit to Councilor Asabi George's question, in many ways, our prioritization process right now for a lot of our bus-related work is where there are the most number of riders who are experiencing the most delay. And it actually tends to be in the very corridors, Councilor, which you said, and that's consequently why we're focusing first there, even if in the list of neighborhoods, we put them at the end of the sentence rather than the beginning. Matt, is that fair? I don't want to.
Yeah, that's exactly accurate.
Okay. And I should just be clear that I citywide, I represent 22 neighborhoods and I love them all. However, there are some that usually get no love, and I need to make sure that I uplift them in these spaces. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Councilor Mejia. Next up, Councilor Bach.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to the department for being here. I'm just going to run through a few of the ones that are in my district. So, I mean, on the on the Boylston Street corridor from Ipswich to Brookline, I don't really have questions. I've had very thorough briefings, as has the community from Charlotte Fleetwood on that. And I think we're really excited about it. I do know there was some issue with sort of the delivery schedule and a kind of pre-existing TAPA that it sounded like was making. Do you know anything about like sort of when we can expect those Boylston Street improvements to actually come online?
I'm happy to take this. So we have a short-term plan that would be from Ipswich to Park Drive. That is, it's at 100% design, and we're hoping to install it next year. And then there's the longer-term plan, which would involve more capital improvements on land owned by DCR and especially the Muddy River crossing area. So that's going to take a bit longer. But our hope is that we'll have continuous protected bike lanes from Brookline Avenue to Ipswich Street by the end of next year in a tactical sort of quick build way. We're working with DCR to see what we can do in the Muddy River section quick build so that they can catch up and do something next year as well.
Great. Yeah, no, and I remember, Charlotte, from our conversation that are we also still waiting on funding for that second bit that gets to the big intersection, or is it a different funding source? Just remind me, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's a state funding source, the TIP it's called.
Great.
So yeah, the TIP keeps sort of moving us out farther, but I think the reality is once we have a design completed and a lot of community support, the TIP funds can move forward a little bit. So we're hoping that the longer term project can happen in 2022. I think the TIP has it in 2023, but we're just marching through the design to get it done as soon as we can.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, and it's all coming back. I remember some of the details about that piece. I guess the thing I was asking about was I had heard that obviously we had the meeting with the community about the quick build Boylston Street stuff. And one question I have about that is where we've landed. I know there was definitely a preference for curbing that kind of cast curb and over what are they called?
Flex posts.
Flex posts, yeah. Where have we landed on that is one question. And the other was that I had heard through the grapevine that we might be a little delayed on that first piece because of something related to construction on the street. So I just wanted to chase that down, whether that's the case or not.
Yeah, there is a lot of construction happening, especially right at Ipswich and Boylston Street. But we're going to try to work it out so that doesn't slow us down on the quick build piece.
Okay.
And we are still, we're experimenting with the precast concrete curbs. We have had some issues. I mean, for the most part, they've been very successful, but we are starting to see some crashes on Mass Ave between Harrison and Mbta. And so we're trying to figure out why that's the case with these precast curbs and, whether we need to make some adjustments or modifications. But, I think they work especially well where there's parking. And on Boylston Street, there will be parking on one side of the street. So we're still kind of learning from this new material. And if we think it makes a lot of sense, we'll use that for the quick build.
Okay, great. Well, definitely would love to continue to partner on this, and both in nudging DCR to more bicycle-friendly designs as necessary, and any help you guys need on this sort of construction smoothing front as well. Happy to talk to people. It's really, as you know, I don't have to tell anybody on this call, like that section, it has been so dangerous for bicyclists for so long. Obviously, obviously we had a death at the major intersection that we're building towards here, but Boylston Street itself is just very fast. And I think, there were a lot of folks on the call when we met a few months back who, even non-bicyclists who are just excited about ways to kind of slow and narrow the street a little bit. And I'm still very interested in that mid-block crossing. Am I right that it's not part of the initial delivery?
That's correct, but we're including it in the longer term plan. Okay,
great. Awesome. And then a question about the North Washington Bridge. I'm sure Councilor Edwards thinks that this is her project, but technically I am on the border of the other side of the North Washington Bridge. And I have a very specific question, Chief Osgood or whoever wants to take it.
Sorry, dear, I was muted. I know it's my project, but go ahead.
Well, I'm just saying, there's a piece of it that I'm going to assert connection to. And specifically it's this. So I'm curious about the pedestrian connection for the harbor walk across there. because I recently noticed that at Lovejoy Wharf, the Harbor Walk runs along the harbor, and then you hit that, you hit a block, and then you're sort of where Night Shift Brewery is and Lovejoy Wharf. And there's actually a sign that says 24-hour public access to continue the Harbor Walk by crossing through a building. If you ring the doorbell that's supposed to give you 24-hour access, they tell you it's out of hours and they won't let you through, which is a problem that I have to take up with building management. But it made me wonder, on the other side, how we're thinking about the pedestrian experience of connecting there. Because every time I've tried to make that pedestrian connection, it's a little fraught.
Par, do you want to walk through the Harbor Walk connection there?
Yes, Chief. Councillor, good to see you. It is a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for? Not muddy, complicated. There are, even going underneath the North Washington Street Bridge, there's a pedestrian bridge that is owned by the Department of Conservation and Recreation. Even though the bridge belongs to them, the city has elected to rebuild that bridge. So there are multiple entities that connect the two sides of that bridge, including going through that building. So those are some of the challenges. We are hoping to improve things through our conversations with DCR, and we'll be happy to connect with you, Council, at a later point to continue this conversation.
Great. All right. Well, yeah, just add me to your list alongside Councillor Edwards on specifically that piece of the thing.
Council, I'll give you a one-on-one briefing on the whole project, even though Councillor Edwards has received that in the past.
All right. Sounds great. No, and honestly, obviously very excited about that it's a huge project. I know that it is going to be a real traffic constraint for Charlestown. That was something I worried about in my prior job at the BHA, but I know that, coming out the other end with a new bridge and with the bicycle lanes and kind of hopefully better connections on the pedestrian front would be amazing. My last question, Chris, is if you could talk a bit, and it might also be for Matt, about the Huntington South Huntington intersection. I mean, I definitely got questions from neighbors just trying to understand, what is the city thinking? Just confirm that isn't work that we did in concert with whatever work happened this August, which I don't think it is, but just if we could clarify that. And I mean, has that been a conversation with the MBTA? I mean, I don't have to tell you that the Mission Hill community is pretty mystified by the fact that the MBTA just spent a bunch of money repairing the line at Heath Street and is now proposing to shorten it at Brigham Circle. And there's a ton of anxiety about it not coming back. And there's a ton of people who rely, as you said, veterans, but also lots of folks who live on the line. I've got thousands of seniors, lots of disabled folks. It's just like the idea of closing the line is really a nightmare. But I think also, so on top of just a frustration and fear there's also just a lot of confusion about sort of these mixed messages from the T. And then I know that a long-term reason people have feared that the T wants to walk away from the line is questions about kind of the facility of the new cars as part of Green Line transformation, making that turn, and just in general, improving the experience, giving better predictability for transit and safer for bikes and cars and peds. And it's very important to me. I mean, again, one of my real frustrations with the MBTA's proposal is I'm all here for let's make the 4 stations that are not accessible. Let's be talking about islands. Let's pull the tracks up against the sidewalk. Let's give people who rely on this line better access. But the idea of sort of solving the problem by taking the transit away and then saying, poof, we no longer have accessibility or timeliness problems just seems to me really backwards. But I am very interested in how we can, as the city, be the best possible partners on, saying to the MBTA, look, we want this line to last, to continue to extend and to be reliable. And how can we help you with the built environment there? So I just would love to understand a little bit more about that plan and where it is in sequencing, confirm it hasn't already happened, and just kind of get some more information to bring back to folks in the neighborhood.
Matt or Bill, do you want to walk through where we are on Heath and South Huntington?
Sure, I can, and Bill, happy to defer to you as well if you want to give us some more insight, especially on the grant side. I know from a process standpoint with the T, we are working towards enhancing pedestrian safety, specifically around accessibility on the Huntington, South Huntington corridors. MassDOT recently launched a study to look at how to make those stops accessible. And I know that they're being, they're trying to accelerate that, and they're trying to make that design, that study happen sooner. So still waiting to hear back about what exactly the timeline looks like, but I know that they're going to be starting a community process around that very soon. And then Chief, happy to defer to you on sort of the city's response on the service cut proposals.
As Councilor Buck knows, I mean, we very much want to preserve service to the E line for all the reasons which you said, and I think that we're obviously all making investments that support the E line beyond Brigham Circle, and both for the needs now and to address the understandable concerns that residents have that if it's taken away, it's not coming back. We want to make sure that we are investing in and improving the E line experience after Brigham Circle, not eliminating it. Bill, is there anything you want to add on the grant side?
Yeah, just from the grant, the $200,000 came from the developer of 105A South Huntington Avenue project. The thought behind that grant back, and this was quite a while ago, was to get a crossing at Heath Street there, a signalized crossing. That being said, $200,000 went a long way, maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, but it doesn't go as far this year. In this day's standard. So that being said, and with the MBTA is thinking about creating a new station there at Heath Street. They want to build a new station that's been spoken about, and we thought rather than go forward with this money right now to create a crossing, albeit a signalized crossing, we were waiting to see the MBTA's plans for the new station. That being said, once we see those plans, then maybe we can somewhat incorporate this crossing so it doesn't conflict with the development of that station, and who's to say when that station's going to be completed. I kind of defer to Matt and others on that one. I mean, things are definitely, it's in a working environment over at the MBTA right now. So who's to say if the station does get pushed out longer, could we go back in there, roll our sleeves up, and use the money to create the crossing where you particularly wanted to do there earlier? That could be so.
Mm-hmm. And were any of the improvements that we had thought about there made as part of the MBTA's track work this summer, or did they not change anything configuration-wise?
There was some improvements that we did, Public Works did. We were able to run some conduit underneath the tracks during the track work over there. So we did get our signal conduit under the tracks, which was a big plus for us. So we did take advantage of that. But outside of that, we didn't go forward with any other plans in that area at this point in time.
And I don't think, and Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think the team made any modifications to the track layout as part of the Green Line sort of enhancements. Is that right?
Right.
Correct, yeah. They saw this as being a emergency repair situation because of the deteriorated shape of the tracks. So they pushed out improvements to that later study that I mentioned before, where they would really look at the accessibility needs for the corridor.
And sorry, Matt, can I just clarify, because you said that's a MassDOT study? So does that mean that you're like the people who are thinking about that are different from the MBTA capital planning folks?
So what they will tell you is that they are one agency. But it's a gentleman over there who's a project manager who's going to be working very closely with the Green Line Transformation folks. I'm not entirely sure how it ended up in the MassDOT side of the house, but I know they'll be working very closely with the Green Line Transformation team on it.
Okay. Well, I guess I would just say, like, I would love to be in the loop. I understand that there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen of us and the MBTA, and apparently also MassDOT vis-a-vis this curve. But I just, there's a lot of community interest, a lot of, again, I think it's infrastructure that's really heavily used, proportionate to kind of its quality, frankly. and one of my frustrations, again, I'm preaching to the choir, but one of my frustrations about the idea of suspending the line there, because it's redundant with a 39 bus, is that it's the busiest section of the 39 bus line, like in the 39 buses whole run. And so it's not really redundant, it's essential capacity. And it takes, as we know, people from very different parts of the city and even region, right, to the Heath Street infrastructure. I just would love to be in the loop on that. And I guess my only concern, Bill, would be, I wouldn't want us to wait indefinitely to use that $200,000 such that it, dwindles away, such that our purchasing power in it declines and declines. Unless, of course, unless we can put it in an interest-bearing account or whatever. But I just want to be careful. I do think there's enough need for improvement in that neck of the woods that if we can find something useful to do with it for people right now, that would be good. But I think, Madam Chair, those are all my questions.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bach. Councillor Edwards, you're next.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, we can hear you now.
Sorry, I'm not in by Wi-Fi. I just wanted to follow up, actually. A lot of my questions, Kenzie Bach had talked about with the North Washington Bridge, but I think in general, I would really like an update, and also wondering if there's going to be another community meeting to come back, or a Zoom about this. I think that has been one of the more helpful patience building, if you will, exercises. The temporary bridge has worked wonderfully, honestly, and I just wanted to make sure that as we're doing massive amounts of rebuilding, restructuring in Charlestown, especially with the new housing development, that there's a marrying component, so that we understand what is going on, I guess, and how you're seeing all of this come together into one big master plan.
That's a great question, and Para, feel free to correct or add to this. I do think, to your point, we can certainly do an update and work with our colleagues at MassDOT on an update on the North Washington Street Bridge project. We do want to sort of roll in some ways the communication that we're doing around North Washington Street with the work that will be coming on Rutherford Ave, the work that will be coming on 1 Charlestown, just so that folks are not looking at 3 different places to understand projects and to understand how they all actually are connecting together. But Para, feel free to correct.
I see, and if you, I'm sorry, and also I see that the corridor in front of the Lost Village, and also the Tetra study for Rutherford Ave. I think maybe in general that ideally there'd be a kind of a traffic update, if you will, for Charlestown. You know how controversial Rutherford Ave was, and the bridge added to that. And there's a real sense, I mean, we dodged, I guess you could say we dodged the bullet with the casino, and how that has, when it was up and running and we were at normal capacity of life, it didn't seem to have a huge impact on the traffic of Charlestown. Kudos, that really demonstrates we can design, we can move, and we can overcome. But I really am encouraging maybe a kind of an updated traffic breakdown, not so much by corridor, but like by Charlestown, and just from the bridge on, all the different ways in which they're marrying together and how they're headed in the right direction. In general, I'm sorry to cut you off. Just one more thing about East Boston's. I know we had a community traffic task force being put together, and Jerome was kind of spearheading that. So I think I'll just follow up with Aisha on that, and to make sure that we're kind of making sure that the East Boston has kind of its eye towards Day Square and things like that.
Absolutely. Danita has also been involved in the East Boston Transportation Action Plan. I don't know if you want to give a quick update on that, or there's any sort of Charlestown-wide update you want to provide.
I can start with East Boston and then hand it over to Para for Charlestown. The first meeting of the East Boston Transportation Action Committee has taken place already. Mm-hmm. And I'm working with the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Services as well as the PPTA to write a scope to hire consultants to help that action committee. We also have some funding allocated through the capital budget to help with that process. And the goal of this committee would be to prioritize the implementation of projects that come out of the Plan East Boston ongoing process.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
Councillor, sorry,
Go ahead.
PJ here. So on the transportation side related to the North Washington Street Bridge and the Rutherford Avenue corridor, there are three buckets which I can put. One is traffic transportation during construction of the North Washington. I think that is going fairly well, thanks mainly to the drop of traffic during the virus. So a tiny bit concerned about the ongoing impacts of the construction. Noise seems to be, way up there. And so if we hold any meetings, we might hear an earful on that front. Then so the second part is how traffic is all going to be stitched together when everything is done, which would be in the Sullivan Square, Rutherford Avenue, North Washington Street. So working with our partners in the transportation department, we might want to give an update as to where things are. So that's second, and happy to continue this conversation from a impact of the development projects, councillor, that are in Charlestown, especially the housing projects. So again, hopefully there's enough capacity on the side streets that approach the Rutherford Avenue corridor to manage that. So happy to continue this conversation, hopefully in a structured manner.
And one last point, and you can redirect me, and I really would like to know what conversations you guys have, or do we have communication regularly with the MBTAs, and the biggest concern being about the ferry in Charlestown. And if that is canceled, which I've gotten many emails about, total opposition to that, but how the pros and cons or the impacts and how you guys are preparing for that. I hope you are in agreement that we don't want it canceled, the ferry, but I don't know that we have ultimate decision-making on that. But I would like to know that we are planning for whatever the results are of that.
Councilor, I can start, and Matt or others feel free to jump in. That is one of the MBTA's proposed service reductions, Charleston Ferry, Hingham Ferry, et cetera. We have, and Mayor's been sort of clear about this, that we are against these proposed service cuts. The T is sort of explicitly expecting that the 92 and 93 bus service will sort of take the place of the Charlestown Ferry. But obviously we would much rather have the Charlestown Ferry running rather than putting, similar, as Councilor Bach said, putting more people on what may be sort of already well-filled buses. But Matt, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
Yeah, we know the Charlestown Ferry serves a critical link for folks that are going from downtown over to the Charlestown Navy Yard. And so in sort of the sort of responses that we are putting together, we're trying to catalog some of those specific harms that it will cause and include that in our overall response. So that's certainly something that we're considering and is near and dear to what we're planning for.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Edwards. I know Councilor Braden has a follow-up as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Back to the Alston, the corridor, the bus lane between Union Square and Brighton or Packard's Corner. And this may be something folks need to take up with the BPDA, but there's some development along that corridor that has essentially blocked the bus lane and made it, basically taken up the whole bus lane. And this has been going on for almost since the bus lane was laid out on the outbound section. And, it seems like we're seeing a lot of development along our corridors, and the fact that a developer can build a building right out onto the sidewalk and then take up a whole lane of your bus, take away your bus lane for years, seems to be so counterproductive. And I really feel that the developers, maybe we need to be talking about some serious mitigation. If they're going to do that, then they need to be paying for our bus lane. So I think that's something we need to take up with our friends over at the BPDA and see if we can make it clear that adequate setbacks are really critically important. Because if they build right out to the edge, then there's no room, no space for future changes like adding a bicycle lane. Just as we see down on the corner of Leo Birmingham and Western Ave, the radius project is right out to the edge, and we could really do with some extra space there to put in a bicycle lane or some other improvements, but it's not possible because the developer has built right out to the edge. So I think the issue of setbacks is something we need to raise up more critically as we look at so much more development along these really busy corridors in our city, and especially in Alston, Brighton. As a comment, can we do more to stop this and to make and can we do something to ensure that our bus lanes aren't just made totally impossible to be used? When you have in that corridor, it's 2/3 of a mile. There's two big projects that are blocking the bus lanes right there, so it makes it almost useless. Thank you.
Councillor, I appreciate the point, and we're happy to sort of be part of that conversation as well. I think, and Matt, correct me if I'm wrong on this, the development that's closer to Packard's Corner, essentially in the construction management plan for that building was essentially approved prior to the actual implementation of the bus lane. So it had sort of figured out how it was going to build its building. We then put down the bus lane, then it started construction. So that one is, like the sequencing makes it look particularly kind of out of step with the mobility improvements we were trying to get through that, improve that corridor. I think there's a way in which we can work collectively on construction management plans to make sure that they are minimizing any impact, temporary impact on bus lanes going forward. And I appreciate your broader point too about thinking about how we build in flexibility as the needs of our streets change. Matt, did I capture that?
Yeah, exactly. It was a case of bad timing, but also I know our construction management team did a pretty thorough traffic analysis and transportation analysis before the project started and after the bus lane had gone in to ensure that there would be that level of delay would be mitigated and so forth. And I can tell you that the construction management plan also includes a restoration plan for the bus lane. So it'll be put back to exactly as it was before.
That's good to know. You don't want to spend 600,000 and then have it blown away by some developer. Okay, thank you so much. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Braden. Before we go to finish the rest of second round for everyone, I want to recognize that Councillor Flynn has joined us and give Councillor Flynn the chance to ask his first and second round if you wish.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Wu, and apologize for being late. I had another meeting I had to attend, but I'll be listening to the tape, watching the tape. Thank you to my colleagues and to the city administration for your testimony and leadership. Again, I was wondering, Chief, if any of the bus lanes are in D2, and if they are, can you just give me a little bit of background information on that?
The one that would be, and Matt, tell me if I'm off on this, the one that I think we would be looking at from this accept and expend would be any pilot version of work along the Summer Street corridor. So obviously, in council, we've had a number of conversations about this, but if we were to look to do something along the Summer Street corridor between the Reserve Channel or First Street and essentially the Fort Point Channel, that would likely come through this. We obviously have a lot of community process in front of us, though, before we think about what a pilot version of that would look like. I don't think, unless we're going to do some refinements to the Silver Line corridor, that Matt or Vineet, anything else would be funded out of this accept and expend that would be in District 2.
Oh, that's correct. Segment.
Yeah, and Chief, could you give a little bit of background, or the Commissioner, with the bus lane and bike lane added? What can we do to help businesses that might need to unload delivery packages or trucks that might need to visit to drop off packages to a particular business. I have many of them in the downtown area, and some of them are not able to make deliveries because of proposals. I'm just trying to think of ways we can be helpful to these business owners and to see what might work, what compromise might work so that they can get deliveries. And so that, these business people also pay high property taxes as well. We just want to do everything we can to be helpful to them, but also to the workforce, to our bus lane riders and bicyclists as well. So wonder what your thoughts might be on that, Chief.
It's a great question, and one which we obviously are really want to think through, because that curb use is really important to support the businesses that our residents rely on. One positive example of this, and Matt gave one earlier along Brighton Ave, but to give one which is sort of in the downtown core on Washington Street between Boylston Street and Avery Street. When that bus lane went in, we actually created a whole set of commercial loading, essentially that entire block length on the CVS side, on the sort of the Boston Commons side, to expand the amount of commercial loading. And I think, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think there was designated commercial loading prior, or it might have been a smaller stretch in that area. We've had some conversations with the Downtown Residents Association about thinking about other loading opportunities in that corridor on things like Avenue de Lafayette, not to overly focus on that corridor, but to your point, it is something which we're very mindful of and want to think about how we allow for commercial loading and curb access, knowing that it's a need, particularly sort of in the commercial areas of your district. Matt, anything else, or Commissioner Benita, anything else you guys would add on that?
And just one more example to add is on, as the Chief said, Avenue de Lafayette, we worked closely with the theater owners and associations, and also with Legal Crossing and some of the other businesses there to get a what's the loading zone during the day, and then turns into pick up drop off in the evening. So it sort of does double duty. It serves businesses that need to load there during more commercial hours, and then when theater patrons are showing up for shows or leaving at the end of the show, it serves for pick up drop off. So I think being flexible with curb space and having it do double duty depending upon the time of day is a strategy that works well there.
Thank you. Appreciate the feedback. Just want to add, when we do engage the residents or the business community, could you send me an email just so I could be on the meeting, or a member of my staff could be on the meeting as well?
Absolutely. Happy to do that.
Thank you, Councilor Wu. Thank you to the city administration that's here. Thank you to my colleagues on the city council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. Okay, we'll resume second rounds now, and then I'll add my questions at the end. So I see Councilor Bach has a question. Just slightly before her in the order was Councilor Mejia. If you had a second round or any other outstanding questions.
No, I don't have any outstanding questions. Just wanted to thank again the administration, and a big shout out again to Chief Osgood. He's one of the best public hearing participants from the administration. You get the gold star. So thank you for being all in at all times. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. Okay, all yours, Councilor Bach.
Thanks. Sorry, this is just a really quick question. It occurred to me that you all might know the answer. So in terms of, I mentioned that there's this building that's meant to have Harbor Walk through access that has effectively blocked it for much of the day. And I have to follow up with the building management, but it would be helpful for me to understand, is that requirement an easement that, or something that came down likely through our city processes, through the BPDA, or is it because it's right adjacent to all the DCR projects, actually a stateside thing, just like, so I can invoke the right concerns when I have that conversation?
Farah, do you know the specifics on that one?
Councillor, it is entirely possible that it's a Chapter 91 license requirement. We will work with I will follow up on this one, Councillor. It would irritate us if they are denying these Chapter 91 requirements. Sometimes I hear all the wrong reasons as to why these things are closed when you're supposed to give 24-hour access. So I'll follow up with your guidance counselor, with the BBDA staff who are in the position to monitor those Chapter 91 license requirements. Because when we do include those requirements through the BBDA Article 80 process, it is supposed to be 24/7 access, not when the sun goes down.
Yeah, and the frustrating thing here is they have a giant sticker that says 24-hour access, and then when you ring the bell, they say, "Sorry, we only allow that during hours." So it's just sort of a misadvertisement and not compliant with the conditions. So it's 160 North Washington Ave, North Washington Street. Sorry, I'll follow up with you, Para. But I would like
Thank
to.
you.
I think those, as we all know, those public access rights, if you don't watch them, can get eroded away.
They quickly forget, and couple of, you don't have to wait generations. Couple of years later, people forget what their rights are, and then it becomes quite awkward.
Yes. Yeah. Great. Thanks. That was all. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bach. I'm told Councillor Edwards is good and will defer her time in terms of second round. So I just have a couple questions because my colleagues have already asked so many important points on the Rutherford Ave Sullivan Square project. I think a similar question from me as we'd been discussing with the Mbta project, that it had felt, I don't know, a year and a half ago at this point, there was this big rush of we couldn't do the surface option. We can't dramatically change things because the federal funding will go away and we need to seize on that. Could you just give an update in terms of, what is the federal funding picture? Are there deadlines to use that up? And what are kind of the very, very specific next steps and timelines?
Bill, do you want to give an overview of the funding location, and then Bill or Para talk about sort of the 25%?
So currently where we're at with funding, this project is fully funded beginning in 2022, up to $151 million. The funding is available, so the project is real. The 25% submittal has already been submitted to Mass DOT. That was submitted on October 5th. That being said, there'll be a 25% design public hearing by Mass DOT somewhere in January or February of this coming year. After that, we'll have a 75% submittal, which will be somewhere around April or May of 21. Then there'll be 100% submittal somewhere around October, November of 2021. And then there'll be a bid on this project somewhere out in 2022, probably February or March of 2022, with construction starting somewhere in September of 2022. That's where we're at with the design. That's where we're at with the funding. If there's any other questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bill. That's really, really helpful. And then just to clarify in terms of community engagement around these next steps as well. So in terms of the 75% and 100% submittal, is it meetings before, or how far before the April, May, and October, November? Is there anything public?
We're going to, there was talk about having another meeting, but since we're fast approaching the 25% public hearing, I think we're going to let Mass DOT go ahead with that. This option right now that we've all agreed on basically takes the roadway from existing 8 lanes down to 5 lanes. So we have 3 southbound and 2 northbound. There's been, so with that design, we've definitely spoken to the T in regard to BRT on Rutherford Avenue, but speaking to the hierarchy of the T, there was not a big push for BRT on Rutherford Avenue at this time. Not that we wouldn't preclude that in the future, but they want to connect all their buses to Sullivan Square at this point in time. So we are providing some BRT lanes in Sullivan Square, I should say.
Okay, so one hearing in terms of the 25% submittal, and then should the public expect any others, before any of these other checkpoints, or no?
I would say being very close to the community, we would have as many meetings as they would like to see. This will be kind of it's fresh for some, but it's not fresh for others. It's been a long time since we've been somewhat out to the community. So that being said, once we do get quite a bit of feedback at that initial meeting, we'll have the appropriate meetings, number of meetings, I should say, that makes the public feel comfortable how we're going with this design.
Okay.
But we do have, I have to stress, we do have a very tight deadline and time restraints with this project. And that being said, and I say this, and I do have concern, this money is programmed in the TIP in 2022. That being said, there's other major projects and infrastructure projects in the state that are definitely looking for additional funding for their projects. But through the MPO, this money has been put aside for the Rutherford Avenue project at this point in time. So the city, as well as other agencies, need to make sure we meet these goals to make sure that this money is spent. If not, this project could be pushed out to other years or years. So I just want to put that on record.
Thank you. And so just to make sure I fully understand what you just said. So the $151 million you're saying needs to be fully spent in 2022, meaning the whole project, you said it will start construction in September, or it just needs to hit that 2022?
What I mean is that the project is funded through the MPO in 2022, 2023, 2024, and up to 2025. Then there's some monies that are allotted and moved around. The project's going to be about a 5-year project. But those monies that are allotted for this particular project in the state, there's other projects need to take a back seat because the city of Boston, is receiving this large amount of money for this project.
Great.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question was around just moving to the dedicated bus lane grant. So can you all just and I think you kind of ran through the corridors quickly earlier, but how many miles of dedicated bus lanes do we have at this moment in the city?
Vineet or Matt might be, I don't know, Matt, you might know by mileage. We can sort of walk through what the corridors are, Councilor, but Matt, you may know mileage off the top of your head.
Yeah, so right now we have about 4 miles of dedicated bus lanes in the city. So this includes the Silver Line corridor down to, from downtown to Nubian Square, the Brighton Avenue corridor, and then some shorter corridors, North Washington Street and the 1 block of Summer Street over by the Federal Reserve.
Okay, and Washington Street, of course.
Exactly.
So this $30 million is for the next year, and how many miles do you expect to add to that with this funding?
Sure. So I can tell you roughly this will we'll be able to paint roughly 800,000 square feet, which I know that number might sound very specific, but I don't necessarily want to talk about the mileage of it right now, just because we're still working through the community process. So if we look at an individual corridor and we say, this might be a transit priority corridor with signals as opposed to bus lanes. This might be bus lanes, or it might be curb bump outs. Each of the corridors might look somewhat different depending upon what the design and community process looks like. So I don't want to give like a number of miles right now, but just to say we're working on a number of corridors, Blue Hill Ave, Warren Street, the Columbus extension from Jackson Square towards Ruggles, Malcolm X, as was highlighted earlier, the Alston-Brighton corridor along Cambridge Street and Washington Street in Alston-Brighton. So those are the corridors that we're looking at. But again, the implementation of those bus lanes might look very different depending upon the corridor.
And
okay, oh, sorry, go ahead, Chief.
And Matt, maybe as a point of context, so if the Brighton Ave stretch was $600,000, the Eggleston Square stretch, which is much more capital intensive, is probably about 10 times that. in terms of cost, roughly. And so it does depend a little bit upon what we're building sort of in the corridors that Matt just went through.
Okay, that makes sense. I was just trying to get a sense of, it sounds like we have 5-ish corridors that you point to now. Some of them are smaller than others or shorter than others. And you mentioned another 5-ish. So is it that we are probably going to double, or is it that they're all much longer and therefore it will feel like there's a lot more priority across the city? I would just love to get a sense of, how far, not exact, tenths of a mile or anything, but is it a doubling? Is it a quadrupling?
It will be a little bit community process dependent, but it could potentially be at least a doubling, I think, in terms of overall mileage. In fact, anyway, maybe even a little bit more than that. Given sort of the nature of the community process, it may be sort of that there's elements of greater sort of construction rather than things that are where we're leading with red paint. So it's hard at this point in time to know what will be completed within sort of next construction season versus started with the next construction season and completed at a later date. But all of those pieces are anyway, all to be sort of worked out in the community process ahead. I would note in that we obviously do have North Washington Street Bridge bus lane under construction. And then as Bill referenced as well, the Sullivan Square bus lanes, there's actually a set of small short bus lanes within Sullivan Square that have been implemented as well, that are also part of kind of the initial implementation list.
Okay, great. And okay, I hear you. Just in terms of just as Bill was walking through the timeline with federal funding or through the regional allocations drying up if we don't hit certain timelines, is this funding from the TEED just for the next year, and therefore if we don't use it up, does it go away, or do we sort of just have it and it's just in the TEED's budget for the next year? Can you just walk through that?
Yeah, and others feel free to correct me on this, but I think we've gotten every indication of a really, frankly, strong partnership with the Mbta, and we really appreciate their support. So this is not the sort of thing where it's only about this year. In many ways, it is more representative of kind of what will be an ongoing partnership between the city and the Mbta to not only to sort of address the corridors that Matt went through, but to think about then what the next generation of corridors would be after that. Matt, is that a fair?
Exactly, yes.
So just to clarify, do you anticipate getting more funding in years afterwards as the T is talking about service cuts? They're still expending funding in this way?
So on this portion of their capital program, yes. We have not heard them pull back from this portion of their capital program. There are some other capital program adjustments which they've indicated or sort of changes they would make to their capital program, but not with their accelerated bus program.
That is ridiculous. Just their planning. It is what it is. Okay. Anyway, so if for whatever reason, okay, sorry. And just to clarify, this doesn't cover maintenance of, patching up the paint or the lanes or anything. It's just to put down new lanes.
That's correct. It is about the implementation of new bus lanes within the city.
Okay, and if there is a change to their budget, if they're all of a sudden deciding that there won't be these funds moving forward, does the city have a backup plan for how we would continue our dedicated bus lane expansion?
So we have self-funded to some degree a portion of the bus lane work, which has happened already, or provide the sort of the seed funding. So I think that there would be some capacity to be able to do it. And obviously with examples like the North Washington Street Bridge, we've been able to roll elements of it into our own capital project, our own capital budget. But having this additional outside funding really does make a difference for us. The sort of umbrella funding that allows us to pursue a bunch of different projects that are not line itemed out within the BTD or Public Works capital budget is very helpful.
Great, thank you very much. I will open it up to colleagues for any last questions or thoughts. If the folks want to raise their blue hand, or I see Councilor Bott coming back on screen too. Let me do a quick tick through. Councilor Braden, are you good? And Councilor Mejia? Okay, Councilor Bach.
No, I was just going to say thank you so much to the team. And just that I think every time we talk about projects like this, we just realize how much appetite there is in the city for even more of them and to accelerate them. Especially as we, especially in terms of thinking about both from a climate change and a density perspective, really prioritizing transit, pedestrians, bicyclists to get people around our city, in a more environmentally friendly and way, and frankly, a way that can move more people more efficiently. And I just wanted to flag again, because that's the nature of most of the improvements that we've talked about today, how disastrous the idea of sending our region hurtling back to a more car-based economy is. I just think we've been talking about all the people on the ground. We have lots of folks who don't have the option of getting in their cars. And so this is just going to result in worse service for them. But we as a city are going to be affected by everyone in outlying suburbs who now drives. It's really concerning in this week where we've got the public comment deadline on Friday for the MBTA's cuts, to kind of be juxtaposing these types of projects with, I think, a very backwards lurch threatened at the state level. So I just wanted to say, for anybody who's watching at home, that getting those public comments into the MBTA about the impact of this before Friday is something we've all got to do. So thank you. That's it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Councilor Bach. Okay, I believe Councilor Edwards has signed off. So just want to thank everyone again, and very grateful for your time. This will conclude today's hearing on various transportation grants sponsored by the mayor, and this hearing will be adjourned. All right. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you.
Bye.